The fluorescent lights in the grocery store had been flickering for 15 years. The same tired rhythm, the same pale glow cast over rows of canned goods and wilting produce that nobody really wanted but everybody needed. Margot Ashford stood behind Register 7. Her fingers moved across the scanner without thought. Muscle memory built from 10,000 shifts that all blurred into one endless loop of beeping and bagging and forced smiles. Milk, bread, generic cereal. The kind that came in bags instead of boxes. The total flashed on the screen. 1947. She looked up at the customer and arranged her face into something approximating cheerfulness. 1947, she said. Her voice carried that practiced brightness of someone who had learned to hide exhaustion behind politeness years ago. The customer handed her a $20 bill, barely glanced at her face. Most people didn't. When you stood behind a register, you became part of the machinery, just another fixture between them and their groceries. Margot made change. Her hands moved steady despite the ache that had settled into her joints somewhere around hour 6. She had 4 more hours to go on this shift. Then she would drive her 15-year-old sedan across town to clean offices in the business district until nearly midnight. The check engine light had been on for 3 weeks now, blinking its orange warning every time she turned the key. She couldn't afford to find out what it meant. Couldn't afford to fix whatever was broken. So she just kept driving and hoped the car would hold together a little longer. Through the store's front windows, she could see the parking lot stretching out into the gray March afternoon. The sky hung low and heavy, winter refusing to release its grip, even though the calendar said spring should be arriving any day now. Patches of old snow clung to the edges of the asphalt, dirty and defeated. A young mother wrestled a toddler into a car seat. The child's protests were audible even through the glass. Margot thought of her own daughter. Iris was 11 now, growing up faster than Margot could keep pace with. Right now, Iris was probably at home in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment, maybe doing homework at the kitchen table. Maybe staring at the refrigerator and hoping something new would materialize for dinner. Margot had left $20 on the counter this morning with a note. Pizza money she had written. As if that made it okay that she wouldn't be home until nearly midnight. As if frozen pizza could substitute for the kind of childhood Iris deserved. The automatic doors slid open. A gust of cold air swept in along with Mrs. Patterson from 2 streets over. She offered Margot a sympathetic smile that made Margot's stomach tighten. Sympathy had a way of making everything worse. It highlighted just how visible her struggles were to everyone around her, how transparent her failures had become. "Margot, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, setting her basket on the counter. "How are you holding up?" "Just fine, Mrs. Patterson. How are you today?" The older woman's eyes lingered on Margot's face, taking in the shadows beneath her eyes. The way her uniform hung a little looser than it had last month. Food had become optional lately. Rent was not. "You work too hard, sweetheart. You need to take care of yourself." Margot nodded and scanned items with mechanical efficiency. She had heard variations of this advice countless times. Take care of yourself. Rest more. ask for help. All of it well-meaning. All of it utterly useless when rent was due in 5 days and she was still $200 short. The advice never came with a check attached. "I'm doing okay," Margot said, bagging the groceries. "Iris keeps me going." "That girl's lucky to have you." Mrs. Patterson paid, and then paused at the end of the counter. Her expression shifted into something more careful. "I heard about your aunt. I'm so sorry for your loss." The words landed heavily in Margot's chest. Aunt Theodora. Aunt Thea. She had died 3 weeks ago, slipped away in her sleep at 78. Margot hadn't seen her in over a year. Life had a way of putting distance between people, even family, even people you loved. "Thank you," Margot managed. After Mrs. Patterson left, Margot stood motionless for a moment. The weight of grief washed over her in small, manageable waves. She couldn't afford to break down. Not here. Not now. Not with 4 hours left on her shift. Aunt Thea had been her father's sister, a woman who had lived alone in a cluttered house on the edge of town. She had been kind to Margot as a child, pressing chocolate chip cookies into her hands during rare family gatherings, speaking to her like she mattered. But as Margot grew older and her parents died as her marriage fell apart and poverty tightened its grip, those gatherings had stopped. Everyone had gone their separate ways, connected only by blood and obligation. The funeral had been small. Margot's siblings had been there, of course. Her older brother, Garrison, successful and smug in his expensive suit, talking loudly about his real estate investments to anyone who would listen. Her younger sister, Vivian, married to a dentist, carrying the kind of designer purse Margot would never be able to afford. Checking her phone every 5 minutes like being at a funeral was an inconvenience. And their cousin Sterling, Aunt Thea's favorite, who had always been treated like the golden child, despite contributing nothing to the family beyond his charm and his ability to say exactly what people wanted to hear. They had stood in the cemetery together, a collection of people who shared DNA but little else. And when Mr. Hartley, the lawyer, mentioned that Aunt Thea had left a will, Margot had seen the way her siblings' faces changed. Interest sharpened behind their eyes. Grief took a back seat to calculation. The reading of the will was scheduled for tomorrow, Saturday morning. Margot had already arranged to take the morning off from the grocery store. It meant losing hours she desperately needed. But family obligation demanded her presence, even if that family had barely spoken to her in years. Even if she already knew she wouldn't be getting anything meaningful from whatever estate Aunt Thea had left behind. People like Margot didn't get windfalls. They got by, barely. Her shift ended at 7. Margot clocked out and grabbed her coat from the break room. The fabric was thin, worn at the elbows. But it was March, and she told herself spring was coming and soon she wouldn't need a coat at all. The check engine light greeted her like an old enemy when she started the car. She drove across town through streets that grew progressively nicer, the houses larger, the lawns more manicured. The distance between her life and the lives of people who never worried about check engine lights growing wider with every mile. The office building she cleaned stood 20 stories tall, all glass and steel and cold corporate efficiency. She let herself in through the service entrance, nodded to the night security guard who knew her by sight, but not by name. The elevator carried her to the 14th floor. The accounting firm that occupied this level always left a mess. Coffee cups abandoned on desks, papers scattered everywhere, trash bins overflowing. Margot moved through the empty cubicles with quiet efficiency. Her hands worked while her mind drifted. She thought about Aunt Thea's house. She had visited once years ago before Iris was born. The place had been filled with furniture, old furniture, the kind that looked expensive but felt worn out, dark wood and heavy fabrics. Aunt Thea had collected things, filling every room with antiques and oddities she had found at estate sales and auctions. Margot's siblings had always made fun of it, calling the house a glorified junkyard. But Margot remembered how Aunt Thea's eyes lit up when she talked about her collections, how she ran her fingers over the carved details of a dresser or the aged leather of a chair, explaining where each piece came from, the history it carried. To Aunt Thea, these objects weren't junk. They were stories. They were connections to the past. Margot finished cleaning at 11:30. She drove home through empty streets, past closed storefronts and flickering streetlights. The apartment building where she lived was a squat gray structure that always smelled faintly of mildew and old cooking oil. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her legs heavy with exhaustion. Iris was asleep on the couch, the television playing softly. An empty pizza box sat on the coffee table. Margot stood in the doorway looking at her daughter. Iris's face was peaceful in sleep, one hand tucked beneath her cheek. She had gotten so tall lately. Soon she would be taller than Margot. Soon she would be a teenager, then an adult. And Margot desperately wanted to give her more than this. More than worn furniture and second-hand clothes and a mother who was always working, always tired, always just barely hanging on. She gently woke Iris and guided her to bed, then collapsed onto her own mattress without bothering to change out of her work clothes. Sleep came fast and heavy, pulling her under like a tide. Morning arrived too soon. Margot woke to pale sunlight filtering through thin curtains. Her body ached in the familiar way it always did, muscles protesting the constant demand she placed on them. She showered and dressed in the only decent outfit she owned, a simple black dress she had bought at a thrift store years ago. She made breakfast for Iris, toast and eggs. The eggs were close to their expiration date, but still good. "Where are you going?" Iris asked, spooning cereal into her mouth. "The lawyer's office, for Aunt Thea's will reading." Iris nodded, her expression carefully neutral. She was old enough now to understand what money meant, what the lack of it cost them. "Do you think she left you anything?" Margot forced a smile. "I don't know, sweetheart. Probably not much. But I have to go anyway. It's the right thing to do." "Will Uncle Garrison be there?" "Probably." Iris made a face. She had met Garrison exactly twice and disliked him both times. He had a way of talking to people as if they were beneath him, especially Margot, especially after her divorce, when she had moved into this apartment and started working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Margot kissed Iris's forehead. "Mrs. Chen next door said you can hang out there if you need anything. I'll be back by lunchtime." The drive to the lawyer's office took 20 minutes. The building was old but well maintained, brick and stone with tall windows that looked out over a small park. Margot parked on the street and fed quarters into the meter, counting out just enough for an hour. She couldn't afford more than that. Inside the reception area was quiet and professional. A secretary directed her to a conference room on the 2nd floor. Margot climbed the stairs slowly, her stomach tight with familiar anxiety. She didn't belong in places like this, places with thick carpets and paintings on the walls, places where people spoke in soft tones about estates and inheritances. The conference room door was open. Inside, her siblings were already seated around a long wooden table. Garrison sat at one end, his posture relaxed and confident. Vivian sat beside him, scrolling through her phone. Sterling leaned back in his chair, looking bored. And at the head of the table sat Mr. Edmund Hartley, Aunt Thea's lawyer. A thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a kind face. "Margot," Mr. Hartley said, standing as she entered. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Margot took a seat across from Vivian. She felt immediately out of place in her thrift store dress. Vivian's outfit probably cost more than Margot made in a month. Garrison glanced at her, his expression a mixture of pity and dismissal. "Good of you to make it," Garrison said, as if Margot were late instead of exactly on time. "Busy schedule," Margot replied quietly. "I work weekends." "Right. Of course." He said it the way someone might acknowledge an unfortunate affliction. Mr. Hartley cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Now that we're all here, let's begin. Theodora left very specific instructions regarding the distribution of her estate." He opened a folder, pulling out several documents. "First, I should mention that Theodora's financial assets, her savings and investments, amount to approximately $43,000. Margot saw Garrison and Vivian exchange glances. 43,000. Not a fortune, but enough to matter. Enough to make a difference. "The cash assets," Mr. Hartley continued, "are to be divided equally between Garrison and Vivian Ashford." Garrison smiled. Vivian looked satisfied. Neither seemed surprised. Margot felt nothing. She had expected this. Her siblings had always been Aunt Thea's favorites, the successful ones, the ones who had built careers and families that looked good from the outside. Margot was the failure, the one who had married young and divorced younger, the one who cleaned floors and rang up groceries. Why would Aunt Thea leave her anything? Additionally, Mr. Hartley said Theodora's house and the land it sits on are to be sold. The proceeds will be split between Garrison, Vivian, and Sterling. Sterling grinned. "Finally. That old place has been falling apart for years. Should still fetch a decent price, though." The house is in good condition, Mr. Hartley said mildly. It will likely sell for around 200,000. More exchanged glances, more quiet calculations. Margot did the math in her head. Split 3 ways, that was over $60,000 each. Enough to change everything. Enough to fix her car, pay off debt, maybe even go back to school. Enough to give Iris the kind of opportunities Margot had always dreamed of providing. But she wasn't getting any of it. Now, Mr. Hartley said, looking directly at Margot, regarding the contents of the house, Theodora left very specific instructions about her collections. Margot's heart sank. She knew what was coming. The junk. The old furniture no one wanted. The furniture and personal items are to be divided as follows. Mr. Hartley consulted his notes. Garrison receives the dining room set, the living room sofa and chairs, and the mahogany desk from the study. Each item was valuable. Margot knew enough about antiques to recognize that her siblings were getting pieces that could be sold for thousands of dollars. Vivian receives the china cabinet, the bedroom furniture from the master suite, and the Persian rug in the hallway. Sterling receives the grandfather clock, the library shelves, and the antique mirror in the foyer. Pieces that meant something. Pieces with worth. And Margot, Mr. Hartley said, his voice gentle, Theodora left you the armoire from the guest bedroom. Silence filled the room. Then Garrison laughed. Not a kind laugh. A sharp, mocking sound that cut through the air like broken glass. The armoire, he repeated. That old piece of junk. Vivian covered her mouth, but Margot could see the smile behind her hand. Even Sterling snickered. Margot's face burned. She knew the armoire Garrison was talking about. She had seen it on that long-ago visit. It was huge and dark and carved with elaborate designs that had probably been beautiful once, but now just looked old and tired. It had taken up most of the guest bedroom, looming in the corner like a forgotten monument. Aunt Thea had kept linens in it, Margot thought. Maybe old clothes. Nothing important. That thing's probably worth $50 at a yard sale, Garrison continued. If that. Why would she even bother leaving it to anyone? Maybe she felt sorry for Margot, Vivian said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Wanted to make sure she got something. Mr. Hartley's expression didn't change, but Margot saw disapproval flicker in his eyes. Theodora's wishes were very clear, he said firmly. Margot receives the armoire. All items must be claimed within 30 days, or they will be donated. Well, Margot can have fun hauling that monstrosity out of there, Sterling said. Hope you have a big truck. Margot sat motionless, her hands clenched in her lap. Shame washed over her in hot waves. This was worse than getting nothing. This was a public declaration of her worthlessness. Even in death, even in the formal setting of a lawyer's office, her family found ways to remind her that she didn't measure up. I'll take it, she said quietly. Garrison raised his eyebrows. Seriously, Margot, you don't have to. It's junk. Just let them donate it. I'll take it, Margot repeated, her voice stronger now. Aunt Thea left it to me. I'll take it. Your choice, Vivian said with a shrug. Don't expect any help moving it, though. That thing weighs a ton. The meeting concluded quickly after that. Garrison and Vivian discussed hiring movers to collect their items. Sterling talked about getting the house appraised as soon as possible. They made plans over Margot's head, their voices filling the room with excited chatter about money and sales and profit. Margot stood and left without saying goodbye. She walked back to her car, her legs moving automatically while her mind spun. The armoire. Of all things. The armoire. She didn't even know where she would put it. Her apartment barely had room for the furniture she already owned. But something in her refused to let her siblings' mockery be the final word. Aunt Thea had left her that piece for a reason. Maybe it was worthless. Maybe it was just one last reminder that Margot was the family failure. But it was hers, and she would claim it. She drove home in silence, the weight of the morning settling into her bones. When she walked into the apartment, Iris looked up from the couch. "How did it go?" Iris asked. Margot sat down beside her daughter, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. "Your uncle and aunt got the money in the house. I got a piece of furniture." "What kind of furniture?" "An old armoire. A big cabinet thing. Your Uncle Garrison called it junk." Iris frowned. "That's mean." "Yeah." Margot leaned back, closing her eyes. "Yeah, it is." "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know where we'd put it." "We could put it in my room," Iris suggested. "I could keep my clothes in it. It would be like having something from Aunt Thea. You know a piece of her." Margot looked at her daughter, this beautiful, perceptive child who somehow saw value where others saw waste. "You'd want that?" "Sure. I mean, if Uncle Garrison says it's junk, it's probably actually cool. He has terrible taste." A laugh escaped Margot's throat, surprising her. "You know what? You're right. We'll get it. I'll figure out how to move it somehow." Over the next week, Margot tried to arrange transportation. The armoire was too big for her car. Rental trucks cost money she didn't have. She called a few moving companies, but their quotes made her stomach drop. $200. $300. Amounts that might as well have been $2 million for all the difference it made. Finally, she swallowed her pride and called the one person she knew who had a truck. Her ex-husband, Dalton. They hadn't spoken in 6 months, not since the last child support payment had arrived 3 weeks late with no explanation. "Margot," he said when he answered, his voice carrying that particular blend of annoyance and resignation she had come to know so well. "What do you need?" She explained the situation, hating how desperate she sounded. "It's for Iris," she added, as if that would somehow make the request more reasonable. "It would mean a lot to her to have something from my family." Dalton sighed. "When?" "Next Saturday. I'll pay for gas." "You don't have to pay me, Margot. I'll do it for Iris." The words should have felt like kindness. Instead, they felt like judgment. One more reminder that she needed help she couldn't afford to give. Saturday arrived cold and cloudy. Dalton pulled up in his truck at 9 in the morning. They drove to Aunt Thea's house together in uncomfortable silence. The house looked smaller than Margot remembered, sitting at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by overgrown hedges. The windows were dark, the porch empty. It had the abandoned look of a place waiting to be dismantled and sold. Margot used the key Mr. Hartley had given her to unlock the front door. Inside the house smelled of dust and old wood and something floral that must have been Aunt Thea's perfume, still lingering in the fabrics and carpets. Furniture filled every room, exactly as Margot remembered, dark and ornate and heavy with history. Jesus, Dalton muttered, looking around. This place is like a museum. They navigated through the hallway to the guest bedroom. The armoire dominated the far wall, rising nearly to the ceiling. It was massive, constructed from what looked like solid oak or maybe mahogany, carved with intricate patterns of leaves and flowers and vines. The doors were tall and heavy, with brass handles that had tarnished to a dull green. "That's it?" Dalton asked. "That's it." He walked around it, assessing. "This is gonna be a nightmare to move. How are we supposed to get this down the stairs?" Carefully. They spent the next hour emptying the armoire. Inside were old linens exactly as Margot had guessed. Yellowed sheets and moth-eaten blankets that smelled of lavender and thyme. She piled them on the bed, intending to throw them away later. When the armoire was finally empty, Dalton tried to lift one end. It barely budged. "This thing weighs as much as a car," he said. "We're going to need help. We don't have help. Then we're going to need more time. And probably some tools." They worked methodically, taking breaks when their muscles screamed in protest. They unscrewed the decorative crown molding at the top to reduce weight. They removed the back panel, which came away in sections. Slowly, painfully, the armoire became manageable, still impossibly heavy, but movable. By noon, they had maneuvered it down the stairs, scraping paint off the walls, leaving scuff marks Margot knew she should probably fix, but couldn't bring herself to care about. They loaded it into the truck bed, securing it with ropes that Dalton promised would hold. "You really want this thing?" Dalton asked as they stood in the driveway, both of them sweating despite the cold. "Iris wants it." He nodded slowly. "She's a good kid." "She is. Better than we deserve, probably." Margot didn't respond to that. The observation sat between them, uncomfortable and true. They drove back to Margot's apartment in silence. Unloading the armoire was somehow worse than loading it had been. The apartment building had no elevator. The stairs were narrow and steep. They had to pivot and angle and curse their way up 3 flights, disturbing neighbors who opened their doors to stare. By the time they wrestled the armoire into Iris's bedroom, Margot's entire body felt like one continuous bruise. Dalton stood in the doorway, catching his breath. "Where do you want it?" "Against that wall, I think." They positioned it carefully, then stepped back. The armoire looked absurdly large in Iris's small room, overwhelming the space with its dark presence. But there was something undeniably impressive about it, too. The carvings caught the light, revealing details Margot hadn't noticed before. Faces hidden among the leaves, animals tucked into corners. It was craftsmanship from another era, when people built things to last generations. Not bad, Dalton admitted. Still junk, though, maybe. He left without ceremony. Margot stood alone in Iris's room, staring at the armoire. She ran her fingers over the carved surface, feeling the smooth wood worn by decades of hands. What had Anthea seen in this piece? Why leave it specifically to Margot? Iris came home that afternoon, her face lighting up when she saw the armoire. "Mom, you got it." "We got it. Your dad helped." Iris walked around it slowly, examining every detail. It's beautiful. It's old. That's what makes it beautiful. Iris opened one of the doors. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, the space was vast and empty, waiting to be filled. "I'm gonna put all my clothes in here," Iris said. "It's like having a closet from a castle." Margot smiled despite her exhaustion. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart." Over the next few days, Iris took ownership of the armoire with an enthusiasm that surprised Margot. She folded her clothes carefully and arranged them on the shelves. She hung her few dresses from the rod inside. She even cleaned the brass handles until they shone. Margot watched her daughter's transformation of the space with quiet wonder. Iris treated the armoire like a treasure, which somehow made it feel like one. Maybe Garrison was right. Maybe it was just junk. But if Iris saw value in it, then it had value. Sometimes worth was just a matter of perspective. On Tuesday evening, Margot came home from her shift at the grocery store to find Iris sitting cross-legged in front of the armoire, a puzzled expression on her face. "Mom," Iris said without looking up, "there's something weird about this thing." Margot set down her purse. "Weird how?" "The inside. It's smaller than it should be." "What do you mean?" Iris stood and gestured to the armoire. "Look, the outside is like this wide." She held her arms out, indicating the full width of the piece. "But inside it's narrower. There's like 6 inches missing on each side." Margot frowned. She opened both doors and looked inside, then walked around to the back. Iris was right. The interior space didn't match the exterior dimensions. There should have been more room inside. "Maybe it's just the way it's built," Margot said. "Old furniture was different." Or maybe, Iris said, her eyes bright with sudden excitement, "there's a hidden compartment." Margot laughed. "This isn't a movie, Iris, but it could be. Aunt Thea collected antiques, right? And sometimes old furniture has secret spaces. I saw it on a show once." "Sweetheart, I don't think. Can we at least look? Please." Margot sighed, but she couldn't deny the small spark of curiosity that had ignited in her chest. "Okay. How do we look?" They spent the next hour examining every inch of the armoire. Iris tapped on the wood, listening for hollow sounds. Margot ran her fingers along the seams, searching for hidden latches or buttons. They found nothing. "Maybe it's just thick wood," Margot said finally. "Maybe there's extra bracing inside the walls." Iris looked disappointed but nodded. "Yeah, maybe." They gave up and went to bed. But Margot lay awake that night thinking about the armoire, about the missing inches, about why Aunt Thea would leave her, specifically her, a piece of furniture her siblings considered worthless. The next day, Margot couldn't shake the thought. During her lunch break at work, she pulled out her phone and searched for information about antique armoires. She learned that European furniture makers in the 18th and 19th centuries often incorporated hidden compartments for valuables. Secret drawers activated by pressing hidden panels. False backs that swung open. Entire sections that could only be accessed if you knew the trick. When her shift ended, she drove home faster than usual. Iris was at the kitchen table doing homework. "Iris," Margot said, "we're going to check the armoire again." Iris's head shot up. "Really? Really? But we're going to be systematic about it this time." They moved everything out of the armoire first, piling Iris's clothes on the bed. Then Margot grabbed a measuring tape from the kitchen drawer. She measured the outside width of the armoire, 68 inches. Then she measured the inside, 56 inches. 12 inches, Margot said slowly. "There's 12 inches missing." "That's a lot," Iris breathed. Margot measured the depth next. Outside 24 inches. Inside 20 inches. Another 4 inches unaccounted for. They stared at each other. The same thought visible in both their eyes. There was space hidden somewhere in this piece of furniture. The question was how to access it. Margot started at the bottom, running her hands along the baseboard. Nothing. She moved up, checking each carved section of the exterior, pressing and pulling, searching for anything that might trigger a release mechanism. Iris did the same on the other side. An hour passed. Then 2. Margot's fingers were sore, her back aching from bending and reaching. Just as she was about to give up, her hand pressed against a carved rose near the right side of the armoire. And something clicked. The sound was soft but unmistakable. A mechanical release, metal against wood. Margot froze. "Iris, did you hear that?" "What was it?" Margot pressed the rose again. Click. She felt the panel beside it shift slightly, moving inward perhaps a quarter of an inch. Her heart began to pound. "There's something here," she whispered. She pressed harder, and the panel slid sideways, revealing a narrow seam that hadn't been visible before. With trembling fingers, she gripped the edge and pulled. The entire right side panel of the armoire's interior swung open like a door, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Iris gasped. Margot couldn't breathe. The space was narrow but tall, running the full height of the armoire. And it wasn't empty. Inside, stacked carefully, were bundles, dozens of them, wrapped in what looked like waxed paper and tied with string. Margot reached in with shaking hands and pulled one out. It was heavy, compact. When she unwrapped the paper, her mind couldn't process what she was seeing. Money. Stacks of $100 bills, bound with paper bands. "Mom?" Iris's voice sounded very far away. "What is that?" Margot couldn't answer. She pulled out another bundle, more bills, and another, and another. The compartment was full of them, packed efficiently into every available inch of space. She sank to the floor, bundles of cash spilling around her. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But the money felt real. The weight of it, the texture of the paper, the faint smell of ink and age. Iris knelt beside her, picking up one of the bundles with reverent care. "Mom, how much is this?" Margot didn't know, couldn't begin to calculate. Each bundle looked like it contained at least $10,000, maybe more. And there were dozens of them in the hidden compartment, maybe more than dozens. She stood on unsteady legs and checked the other side of the armoire. There was a matching carved rose on the left panel. She pressed it. Another click. Another hidden door swung open, revealing a second compartment also filled with wrapped bundles. "Oh my God," Margot whispered. "Oh my God." They pulled everything out, working in stunned silence. The bundles covered Iris's bed, the floor, every available surface. When the compartments were finally empty, Margot stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. "We need to count it," she said, her voice barely audible. They counted through the night. Each bundle contained exactly $10,000 in $100 bills. There were 326 bundles. $3,260,000. Margot sat on the floor at 3 a.m, the final tally written on a piece of paper in her trembling handwriting. Iris leaned against her shoulder, exhausted and overwhelmed. "What do we do?" Iris whispered. Margot didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind had gone blank with shock. This was more money than she could earn in a dozen lifetimes. More money than she had ever dreamed of having. It was enough to change everything, to erase every debt, every worry, every sleepless night spent calculating how to pay bills. It was the answer to prayers she had been too tired to pray. But it was also impossible to explain, impossible to justify. Where had Aunt Thea gotten this money? Why had she hidden it? And why had she left it hidden and secret to Margot? The questions spiraled through her mind, but beneath them ran a single crystal-clear thought. This was hers. Aunt Thea had given her the armoire, had left it specifically to her. Whatever was inside, whatever fortune had been hidden within those false panels, it belonged to Margot now. She looked at the bundles of cash covering her daughter's bedroom, and for the first time in years, she let herself imagine a different life. A life where Iris didn't have to wear second-hand clothes or eat frozen pizza for dinner. A life where Margot didn't have to work until her body broke. A life where they had options, security, hope. "We don't tell anyone," Margot said finally. "Not yet. Not until I figure out what to do." Iris nodded against her shoulder. "Okay." They sat together in the quiet apartment, surrounded by bundles of cash and the massive armoire that had delivered them. Outside, the world continued its indifferent rotation, unaware that everything in Margot Ashford's life had just fundamentally changed. The sun was rising when Margot finally moved. She and Iris carefully wrapped the money back in its paper, handling each bundle as if it might disappear if they weren't gentle enough. They placed everything back into the hidden compartments, closed the false panels, and stood looking at the armoire as if seeing it for the first time. It looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, dark and carved and ancient. But now Margot understood what Aunt Thea had seen in it. Not junk, not a cast-off piece of furniture to be mocked and dismissed. This was a gift, a secret passed from one woman to another, a last act of love from someone who had watched Margot struggle and wanted finally to give her a way out. Margot pressed her hand against the carved surface, feeling the grain of the wood beneath her palm. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Aunt Thea." Iris hugged her mother tightly. Neither of them spoke. There were no words big enough to contain what had just happened. No way to articulate the magnitude of the shift that had occurred in the space of a single night. Finally, Margot pulled away. "You need to sleep, and I need to think." "Are we going to keep it?" Iris asked. "I don't know. I need to figure out if it's even legal to keep it. But Aunt Thea left it to you, I know. But money like this, Iris, there are rules about these things. Taxes, laws. I don't want to do anything that could get us in trouble." Iris nodded, though her expression showed she didn't really understand. Margot barely understood herself. Her brain felt sluggish, overwhelmed by exhaustion and shock. But one thing was certain. Her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. And there was no going back to the woman she had been yesterday, the woman who stood behind a register and accepted her place at the bottom. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone new. Someone who had $3 million hidden in her daughter's bedroom. Someone who had options now. Choices. Someone who for the first time in her adult life had the power to say no to the world that had always told her she wasn't enough. Margot looked at the armoire one more time, at the carved roses that had unlocked everything. And she made herself a promise. She would figure this out. She would find a way to keep what Aunt Thea had given her. And she would use it to build the life she and Iris deserved. Not through luck, not through charity, but through the deliberate gift of a woman who had seen value in Margot when no one else did. The armoire stood silent in the early morning light, keeper of secrets, guardian of fortunes. And Margot Ashford stood before it, no longer the dismissed sister, no longer the struggling single mother, barely holding on. She was something else now, something her siblings couldn't see, something the world hadn't recognized. She was worthy. She was chosen. She was enough. And she had $3 million to prove it. Margot called in sick to both her jobs. It was the first time she had called in sick in over 2 years. The guilt gnawed at her even as she did it. But she needed time. Time to think. Time to research. Time to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do with $3 million hidden in her daughter's bedroom. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. Her hands shook as she typed searches into Google. How to handle large cash inheritance. Do you have to report found money? Tax implications of inherited cash. The results were confusing and contradictory. Some articles suggested that inherited money wasn't taxable. Others warned about gift taxes and estate taxes. Most assumed the money would be properly documented, transferred through banks, recorded in official ways. None of them addressed the specific situation Margot found herself in. Money hidden in furniture. Money that appeared nowhere in Aunt Thea's will or estate documents. Money that existed in a legal gray area Margot didn't know how to navigate. She thought about calling a lawyer, but lawyers cost money she still didn't have. And more importantly, they would ask questions. Where did the money come from? Why was it hidden? Had Aunt Thea done something illegal to obtain it? That last question stopped Margot cold. What if the money was illegal? What if Aunt Thea had been involved in something criminal, and this cash was evidence or proceeds or something that would bring police and investigators in questions Margot couldn't answer? Her stomach churned with anxiety. Maybe she should just put it back in the armoire and pretend she'd never found it. Return the furniture to Aunt Thea's house. Let someone else discover the secret. Walk away before this blessing became a curse. But even as the thought formed, she knew she wouldn't do it. Couldn't do it. This money represented everything she had never been able to provide for Iris. Education, security, a future that didn't involve working multiple jobs and counting pennies. She couldn't walk away from that. Not after years of struggling, years of falling short, years of watching her daughter grow up with less than she deserved. Whatever this money was, wherever it came from, Aunt Thea had left it to her. And Margot was going to find a way to keep it. She spent the day researching, reading articles about inheritance law and tax code until her eyes burned. By evening, she had a rough plan. She would need to verify the money was real. Counterfeit bills would be worthless and potentially criminal to possess. She would need to find a way to deposit or use the money without raising red flags. And most importantly, she would need to keep it secret until she understood exactly what she was dealing with. The next morning, Margot drove to a bank across town, one where she didn't have an account. She brought a single $100 bill with her, claimed she had received it as a tip at work and wanted to verify it wasn't counterfeit. The teller examined it under ultraviolet light, checked the watermark, ran her fingers over the texture, "It's genuine," the teller said, handing it back. "You're good." Margot's relief was almost overwhelming. She repeated the process at 2 other banks over the next 3 days, bringing different bills each time. Every one came back genuine. The money was real. $3,260,000 in real legal currency. Now she just had to figure out how to use it without destroying her life in the process. The weeks that followed the discovery existed in a strange, suspended reality. Margot went to work, came home, made dinner, helped Iris with homework. On the surface, nothing had changed. But underneath, everything was different. She moved through her days with a secret burning in her chest, a knowledge that separated her from the rest of the world. $3 million sat hidden in Iris's bedroom and no one knew. Margot researched obsessively. Late at night, after Iris was asleep, she hunched over her laptop at the kitchen table, reading everything she could find about large cash deposits, structuring laws, and IRS reporting requirements. What she learned terrified her. Banks were required to report any cash deposit over $10,000. Multiple smaller deposits designed to avoid that threshold, called structuring, were illegal. Even if the money itself was legitimate, trying to hide it could land her in federal prison. The system was designed to catch exactly what she was trying to do. She couldn't just walk into a bank with bundles of $100 bills. The questions would be immediate and invasive. Where did this come from? Why do you have it in cash? Can you prove it's yours? And even if she could prove it, even if she showed them Aunt Thea's will and the armoire, the scrutiny would destroy any chance of keeping the discovery private. Her siblings would find out. They would challenge the inheritance. They would argue that the cash should have been declared as part of the estate divided among all of them. And they would probably be right. Legally speaking, Margot didn't know enough about estate law to be certain. But she suspected that hidden assets were still part of an estate regardless of where they were hidden. The thought of Garrison and Vivian learning about the money made her physically ill. She could already hear Garrison's voice sharp with accusation. She could see Vivian's face twisted with indignation. They would take it from her. They would use lawyers and legal procedures and their connections to people who knew how these things worked. And Margot, who could barely afford her rent, would have no way to fight back. No. She couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But that left her with an impossible problem. How could she use money she couldn't deposit, couldn't explain, couldn't acknowledge she had 6 weeks after finding the money? Margot's phone rang while she was at work. Mr. Hartley's name appeared on the screen. Her heart stopped. Had someone found out? Had the bank reported something? Had her siblings noticed? "Margot," Mr. Hartley said when she answered, his voice warm and professional. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I wanted to follow up regarding your aunt's estate. Have you claimed the armoire yet?" Margot's throat was dry. "Yes, a few weeks ago." "Wonderful. I'm calling because I've been going through Theodora's papers more thoroughly, and I found something I thought you should have." He paused. "A letter. She left it in a sealed envelope with your name on it. I don't know what it contains, but she was very specific that you should receive it after taking possession of the armoire. Margot's hands began to shake. A letter. "Would you be able to stop by my office to collect it?" Hartley asked. "Yes. Whenever is convenient for you." "Tomorrow this week." "Tomorrow, I can come tomorrow." That night, Margot barely slept. A letter. Aunt Thea had left her a letter. Did it explain the money? Did it provide instructions or warnings or some kind of justification for the fortune hidden in the furniture? By morning, Margot's nerves were frayed to breaking. She called in sick to the grocery store again, knowing she was using up goodwill she couldn't afford to lose, but unable to wait. Iris was at school. The apartment was quiet as Margot dressed carefully, as if preparing for something important, as if the letter might somehow change everything again. Mr. Hartley's office looked the same as it had during the will reading. Same thick carpets, same paintings on the walls. But this time, Margot walked in feeling different. Not defeated, not ashamed, just uncertain about what came next. "Margot." Hartley stood and shook her hand. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please sit." He retrieved an envelope from his desk drawer. It was cream-colored, expensive looking, with Margot's name written across the front in elegant cursive. Aunt Thea's handwriting. Margot recognized it from old birthday cards she had received as a child. "She left this with very specific instructions," Hartley said, handing it to her. "You were to receive it only after claiming the armoire. I don't know what it says, but Theodora was quite emphatic that you read it in private." Margot took the envelope with trembling fingers. "Thank you." Hartley's expression softened. "Theodora spoke very highly of you in our meetings. She said you were the only one in the family who understood the value of things that couldn't be bought or sold. I think she would have been pleased to know the armoire went to someone who would appreciate it." Margot couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. She nodded, tucked the envelope into her purse, and left. She drove to a park on the far side of town. Somewhere she had never been before, where no one knew her. She sat on a bench overlooking a small pond and opened the envelope with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Inside were 3 handwritten pages, the same elegant script she had seen on the envelope. Margot unfolded them and began to read. "My dear Margot, if you are reading this, then you have taken the armoire home. You have probably endured mockery from your siblings, who never understood the difference between price and value. And if you have been as curious as I hope you have been, you have discovered what I left hidden inside. I imagine you have questions. The first is probably, where did the money come from? The answer is both simple and complicated. It's mine. I earned it, saved it, and chose to hide it, rather than let it be consumed by an estate system designed to distribute everything according to rules that don't account for love or understanding. Let me explain. 60 years ago, when I was 18, I met a man named James Whitmore. He was brilliant and ambitious. A man who had come from nothing and built a successful import business through sheer determination. We fell in love. In 1965, we married in secret. because my family would never have accepted him. Your grandfather was a hard man, with firm beliefs about who was worthy and who wasn't. James was black. Therefore, in your grandfather's eyes, he was not worthy. We kept our marriage hidden for 5 years. James's business grew steadily. We traveled. We built a life together in the margins of society where couples like us could exist. We were happy. And then James died in a car accident. He was only 28. I inherited his business. His family had disowned him for marrying outside their community, so I was his sole beneficiary. I was 23 years old and suddenly responsible for a company I barely understood. Your grandfather demanded I sell it immediately, return to the family, marry someone appropriate, someone white, someone acceptable. I refused. Instead, I learned the business. I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. And over the next 40 years, I turned James's modest import company into something substantial. I sold it in 2010 for $18 million. The money I left hidden in the armoire is what remains after 40 years of living comfortably, but carefully. I paid my taxes. I donated to charities. I lived in my house and collected my furniture, and never wanted for anything. But I also never told anyone about the extent of my wealth. Not your father, not his siblings, not anyone. Why? Because I learned early that money changes how people see you. It changes what they expect from you. And I valued my privacy, my autonomy more than I valued the approval of a family that never understood me. I'm leaving the cash to you specifically, Margot, because I see myself in you. You married young against better judgment, perhaps, and it didn't work out. You've struggled. You've been dismissed by people who should have supported you. You've watched your siblings succeed in conventional ways while you've fought just to survive, but you've never given up. You've worked yourself to exhaustion for your daughter. You've maintained your dignity, even when others offered you none. You've understood, as I once did, that some things matter more than money. Like integrity, like love, like showing up for the people who need you. This money is yours, Margot. Not Garrison's, not Vivian's, not the government's. It's yours to use however you see fit. I hid it because I knew that if it were distributed through normal channels, your siblings would find ways to take it from you. They would use lawyers and procedures and their connections to ensure you got as little as possible. I couldn't let that happen, so I hid my wealth in plain sight. In a piece of furniture everyone else would dismiss as junk. I knew you would take it. I knew you wouldn't sell it immediately like they would. And I suspected hope that you or your daughter would eventually discover what I had hidden inside. Now, for the practical matters. The money is legally yours. It came from the sale of my business, which was properly documented and taxed decades ago. I kept it as cash because I preferred having it accessible and private. There is nothing illegal about possessing cash, though I understand it creates complications in today's banking system. I can't tell you how to handle it. That's your decision. But I can tell you what I learned over my years of having more money than people knew. The secret to wealth is not spending it all at once. It's not showing it off. It's using it quietly, carefully to build security and opportunities that don't draw attention. You can't deposit large amounts without triggering reports. But you can pay cash for things. You can make careful investments through intermediaries. You can improve your life in small, sustainable ways that don't advertise what you have. Most importantly, you can give Iris the kind of childhood you never had. The kind I never had. One where money isn't a constant source of anxiety and shame. Be careful, Margot. Your siblings will resent any improvement in your circumstances. They're comfortable when you're struggling because it confirms their belief that they're better, smarter, more deserving than you. Don't give them ammunition. Don't let them know what you found until you're ready to defend it. And when the time comes when you do have to reveal what you have, stand firm. This is yours. I gave it to you because you deserve it. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Live well, my dear. Give Iris my love. And remember that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones everyone else overlooks. With all my affection, Aunt Theodora Margot read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. The words blurred together, but their meaning remained crystal clear. Aunt Thea had known exactly what she was doing. She had planned this, orchestrated it, made sure that Margot and only Margot would receive the wealth she had spent a lifetime accumulating. The money wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was love. A deliberate act of care from one woman who had been dismissed and underestimated to another who lived the same experience every day. Margot sat on that park bench for over an hour, holding the letter, letting its implications settle into her bones. She had been terrified that the money was illegal, that claiming it would destroy her life. But Aunt Thea had earned it legitimately. She had hidden it not from the law, but from family members who would have taken it from Margot through legal means. The realization was both freeing and infuriating. Aunt Thea had understood exactly how Garrison and Vivian operated. She had known they would fight any inheritance that favored Margot. And so she had outmaneuvered them, using their own dismissive assumptions against them. They had looked at the Armoire and seen junk. They had looked at Margot and seen failure. Neither judgment had been accurate. And now their blindness had cost them millions of dollars. Margot carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She tucked it deep into her purse. Then, she drove home, her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. She had permission now. Not just legal permission, though the letter helped establish that, but emotional permission. Aunt Thea had given her blessing, had told Margot explicitly that she deserved this money and should use it without guilt. That evening, Margot sat Iris down at the kitchen table. "I got a letter from Aunt Thea today," Margot said, "about the Armoire." Iris's eyes widened. Did she know about the money? She hid it there, on purpose, for us. Margot pulled out the letter and handed it to Iris, who read it slowly. her expression shifting from confusion to wonder to something like pride. She was married to someone, Iris said when she finished. And she ran a business for 40 years. She was incredible, Iris. And she wanted us to have this money because she believed we would use it wisely. Are we going to tell Uncle Garrison and Aunt Vivian? Not yet. Maybe not ever. Aunt Thea was right about them. If they knew, they would try to take it. And I'm not going to let that happen. Iris nodded slowly. So what do we do? Margot had been thinking about this constantly since finding the money. We use it carefully. We improve our lives without advertising what we have. We save most of it. And we make sure you have opportunities I never had. Like what? Like a good education. Not just public school, but maybe private school if you want it, or tutoring, or college without worrying about student loans. Like whatever dreams you have that I could never help you achieve before. Iris's eyes filled with tears. I don't need all that, Mom. I just need you to not be so tired all the time. The words hit Margot like a physical blow. She pulled Iris into a hug, holding her daughter while they both cried. I know, baby. I know. And things are going to change, I promise. That week, Margot made her first major decision. She quit her second job, the office cleaning position that kept her out until midnight. Her supervisor seemed surprised, but not suspicious. People quit all the time in that industry. The turnover was constant. Margot gave 2 weeks' notice, worked her final shifts, and collected her last paycheck. Coming home at 7 in the evening instead of midnight felt revolutionary. She had time to make real dinners, time to help Iris with homework, time to sit on the couch and watch television without falling asleep from exhaustion. She kept her job at the grocery store. Quitting both jobs at once would raise questions, and she needed to maintain some visible source of income. But having her evenings back changed everything. She felt human again, present in her own life instead of sleepwalking through it. Iris thrived with her mother home more often. She smiled more, talked more, seemed lighter somehow. Margot realized with painful clarity how much her constant absence had affected her daughter. All those years of working herself to death, she had thought she was providing. But what Iris had needed most was simply her presence. She began making plans. Careful, long-term plans that wouldn't draw attention but would fundamentally alter their trajectory. First priority, moving to a better apartment. Not immediately. That would be suspicious. But in 6 months or a year, she could claim she had saved up enough for a security deposit on a nicer place. Somewhere with 2 real bedrooms, windows that didn't stick, a kitchen with appliances that worked. Second priority, Iris's education. Margot researched private schools in the area, looking at tuition costs and admission requirements. Most were beyond what she could claim to afford even with careful budgeting. But there were scholarship programs, financial aid options. Third, priority, legitimizing small amounts of the money. She opened a savings account at a different bank than her regular checking account. Over 2 months, she deposited small amounts until the balance reached $15,000. When the teller asked about the cash deposits, Margot explained she had been saving tips from her retail job and finally felt comfortable putting them in the bank. The explanation was accepted without question. Poor people saved cash at home all the time. It wasn't unusual. With 15,000 in accessible funds, Margot felt a weight lift. She had a buffer now. Security. If Iris got sick, if the car broke down again, if any emergency arose, she could handle it without panic. 4 months after discovering the money, Margot found an apartment complex on the better side of town. The kind of place with a playground and a small fitness center and doors that locked properly. The rent was $800 more than her current place, a number that would have been completely impossible 6 months ago. Now it was manageable. If she budgeted carefully and supplemented her visible income with strategic cash payments, she applied for the apartment, providing her employment information and banking statements that showed enough savings to cover the security deposit and first month's rent. The application was approved. Move-in date 6 weeks. Margot told Iris that night. "We're moving." Iris looked up from her homework, startled. "Moving where?" "Somewhere better. Somewhere you'll have your own bathroom. Somewhere safe." "How can we afford that?" "I've been saving. And I got a small raise at work." Another lie, but necessary. "We're going to be okay, Iris. Things are getting better." Iris threw her arms around Margot's neck. "Really? We're really moving. Really." That night, lying in bed, Margot thought about Aunt Thea's letter. "Live well, my dear." She was trying, carefully, quietly, without drawing attention. But she was building something new from the foundation her aunt had given her. A life where Iris didn't have to grow up feeling poor, feeling less than, feeling like opportunity was something that happened to other people. The money was changing them, not in dramatic ways visible to outsiders, but in small, fundamental shifts that rewrote the story of who they were and what they could become. Margot allowed herself for the first time in years to feel hope. Not the desperate, clawing hope of someone drowning and reaching for anything that might save them, but calm, steady hope grounded in the reality of having resources, having options, having a future that extended beyond just surviving until tomorrow. Moving day arrived on a Saturday in late spring. Margot had hired movers this time, paid them in cash. They loaded the furniture efficiently, including the massive armoire which took 4 men to carry down the stairs. Margot watched them work, making sure they were careful with every piece, but especially with the armoire. "That's solid wood," one of the movers commented, running his hand over the carved surface. "They don't make them like this anymore. Probably worth a fortune." "It was my aunt's," Margot said simply. "It means a lot to me." The new apartment was everything the old one wasn't. Bright, clean, spacious. Iris ran from room to room, her excitement infectious. Her bedroom was twice the size of her old one, with a real closet and 2 windows that looked out over the courtyard. They set up the armoire in Iris's new room. It looked different here, in a space that matched its dignity. Not a relic surviving in poverty, but a piece of furniture finally placed somewhere it belonged. That night in their new home, Margot made dinner in a kitchen with a full-size refrigerator and a stove where all 4 burners worked. Iris set the table with plates that matched, purchased specifically for the occasion. They ate together, talking about school and plans for the summer and all the small, ordinary things that felt extraordinary because they were happening here. In this place they had earned through Aunt Thea's gift and Margot's careful stewardship of it. After Iris went to bed, Margot stood in the living room of their new apartment, looking around at the space they now occupied. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't even particularly impressive by most standards, but it was clean and safe and theirs. And it represented the first visible change in their circumstances, the first evidence that something fundamental had shifted. She thought about calling her siblings, telling them about the move. But she decided against it. They would ask questions. They would want to know how she could afford this. And Margot wasn't ready to answer those questions. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Let them wonder. Let them make assumptions. The truth was hers to keep or reveal as she chose. For now, for tonight, Margot simply stood in her new living room and let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She had been given a gift she had never imagined possible, and she was using it carefully, wisely, to build a life worth living. 3 months passed in this new rhythm. Margot worked her single job, came home at reasonable hours, spent evenings with Iris. They cooked together, watched movies, did homework at the kitchen table. Simple things that had been impossible when Margot worked herself to exhaustion across 2 jobs. The money remained mostly untouched. Margot had legitimized about $30,000 through careful deposits over time, building a savings account that gave her breathing room. But the vast majority of the fortune still sat hidden in the armoire, a secret that belonged only to her and Iris. Until the day Vivian showed up unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon in September. Iris was at a friend's house. Margot was cleaning the apartment when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw her sister standing in the hallway, looking polished and irritated in equal measure. Margot's stomach dropped. Vivian had never visited before, never even asked for the address of the old apartment. This was deliberate. This was something. Margot opened the door, keeping her expression neutral. Vivian, this is a surprise. Vivian's eyes swept past her, taking in the apartment's interior. Can I come in? Of course. Margot stepped aside, her heart beginning to pound. Vivian walked into the living room with the assessing gaze of someone calculating value. She looked at the furniture, most of it second-hand but clean and functional. She looked at the windows, the walls, the space itself. Margot could see her sister's mind working, adding up what this apartment must cost. Nice place, Vivian said, the words carrying an edge. When did you move? a few months ago. The old apartment was getting too small for Iris. Must have been expensive. This is a good neighborhood. We manage. Vivian turned to face her fully. Margot, I'm going to be direct. Garrison and I have been talking. We're concerned about you. Concerned? Margot kept her voice even. About what? About your finances. About how you're suddenly able to afford a place like this, when 6 months ago, you were complaining about not being able to fix your car. Vivian crossed her arms. Where did you get the money, Margot? I work. I save. It's not that complicated. Don't insult my intelligence. This apartment has to be at least $1,200 a month. Probably more. You work at a grocery store. The math doesn't work. Margot felt her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to remain calm. I quit my second job. That freed up time to budget better. And I got a small raise. A raise, Vivian's tone dripped with skepticism. Big enough to double your rent. I don't see how this is any of your business. It becomes my business when I think you might have done something with Aunt Thea's estate that wasn't disclosed. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Did she give you money we don't know about? Did you find something when you cleaned out that armoire? Margot's blood ran cold. This was it. The confrontation she had known was coming but hoped to delay indefinitely. The will was public record, Margot said. You know exactly what I got. The will listed assets that were declared. But Aunt Thea was eccentric. She could have hidden cash, jewelry, something valuable you're not telling us about. She left me a piece of furniture, Vivian. That's all. Then how do you explain this? Vivian gestured around the apartment. The new clothes Iris has been wearing, the working car, the fact that you're not constantly broke anymore. I'm managing better. That's all there is to it. Vivian stepped closer, her voice lowering to something almost threatening. If you found money, Margot, it's part of the estate. It should have been divided equally. If you're hiding assets, that's illegal. Garrison and I can challenge this. We can get lawyers involved. Margot felt anger rising, hot and bright. Years of being dismissed, mocked, treated as less than. Years of watching her siblings take and take while she scraped by. All of it coalesced into a fury that burned away her fear. Get out! Vivian blinked. What? Get out of my apartment now. Margot, I'm trying to help. You're trying to take from me, again. Like you always do. But this time there's nothing to take. I got a piece of furniture you all called junk. That's what's in the will. That's what I have. Margot moved toward the door, opening it. Leave. Vivian's face flushed with anger. This isn't over. Garrison's going to hear about this. And if we find out you're hiding something, then what? You'll sue me? Go ahead. I have nothing to hide. Vivian left, her heels clicking sharply against the hallway floor. Margot closed the door and leaned against it, her legs shaking. She had won that round. But it wasn't over. Vivian would tell Garrison. They would investigate. They would start asking questions Margot didn't want to answer. She needed to prepare. 2 weeks later, Garrison called. Margot was at work when her phone rang. His name flashing on the screen. She almost didn't answer. But ignoring him would only make things worse. Garrison. Margot, we need to talk. Vivian told me about your new apartment. It's a nice place. Iris loves it. I'm sure she does. Margot, I'm going to be frank with you. Your financial situation has changed dramatically, and the timing is suspicious. You moved into a better apartment just months after Aunt Thea died. That's not a coincidence. I saved money. I improved my circumstances. That's called being responsible, or it's called hiding assets from an estate. Margot, if you found something valuable in that armoire, you need to disclose it. I've spoken with a lawyer. If you're concealing property that should have been part of the estate distribution, we can take legal action. Margot felt her jaw tighten. Take legal action then, but you won't find anything, because there's nothing to find. I want to see the armoire. The request hung in the air, dangerous and direct. Margot's mind raced. Why? Because if there was something hidden in it, there might be evidence. Secret compartments, concealed spaces. I want an expert to examine it. It's a piece of furniture, Garrison. That's all. Then you won't mind if someone takes a look. Actually, I do mind. It's mine. Aunt Thea left it to me. You have no right to it. I have every right if it's being used to hide assets that should have been distributed equally. You got your inheritance, Garrison. So did Vivian. Be satisfied with that. This isn't about satisfaction. It's about fairness. And if you're hiding something, Margot, I will find out. He hung up before she could respond. Margot stood in the break room of the grocery store, her hands trembling. They were closing in. Garrison wouldn't let this go. He would push and investigate and demand until he found something, or convinced himself there was nothing to find. 3 weeks later, Rachel came home from work to find Garrison and Vivian waiting in the lobby of her apartment building. The manager must have let them in despite Margot's instructions that no one should access the building without her permission. Margot, Garrison said, standing as she entered, we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Then you'll listen. He held up a folder, thick with papers. I have documentation here showing that your monthly expenses exceed your reported income by at least $800. I have photographs of your new furniture, Iris's new clothes, your repaired car. You've spent thousands of dollars in the past 6 months that you can't account for. How I spend my money is none of your business. It is when that money came from our aunt's estate. Vivian stepped forward, her expression cold. You found something, Margot. We know you did. And you've been hiding it from us. The only thing I found was the furniture you all mocked. The junk you said wasn't worth hauling away. Then let us see it, Garrison demanded. Let us bring in an expert to examine it. If there's nothing hidden, you have nothing to worry about. Margot felt her control slipping. You want to see it fine? Come up." She led them to her apartment, her heart pounding with every step. She was calling their bluff, or maybe she was ready for this to end. Either way, the confrontation had arrived, and running from it wouldn't make it disappear. Inside the apartment, she led them to Iris's bedroom. The armoire stood against the wall, as imposing and beautiful as ever. Garrison walked around it, examining the wood, the carvings, the structure. It's big, decent craftsmanship, but nothing special. Maybe worth a few thousand at most. That's what you said before. Margot crossed her arms. So why are you here? Because I think there's something inside it. Or there was. A hidden compartment, maybe, where Aunt Thea stashed something valuable. Then look. Garrison pulled open the doors. The interior was filled with Iris's clothes, neatly folded on shelves. He began removing items, stacking them on the bed. Vivian helped, both of them rifling through Iris's belongings with the kind of entitlement that made Margot's skin crawl. They examined every shelf, every corner. They knocked on the wood, listening for hollow sounds. They measured the interior dimensions and compared them to the exterior. And Margot watched, her expression calm, while her heart raced. They were close. So close to discovering the hidden panels. But they didn't know about the carved roses. They didn't know the specific trigger points. They were looking, but they couldn't see. After 30 minutes, Garrison stepped back, frustrated. There's something off about the dimensions. The interior is smaller than it should be. Old furniture is built thick, Margot said. That's why it lasts. Or there are hidden compartments. He pressed his hands against the interior walls, searching for release mechanisms. Vivian did the same on the other side. Margot held her breath. One of them could stumble on the roses by accident, could press the right spot and reveal everything. But luck or perhaps fate kept them from the exact locations that would unlock the truth. After another 20 minutes, Garrison finally gave up. Fine. There's nothing here. But that doesn't explain your finances, Margot. I don't owe you an explanation. You do if you're using money that should have been distributed among all of us. I'm not. Margot met his eyes steadily. Aunt Thea left me the armoire. That's what I have. Nothing more. Then how do you afford this place? I budget, I work, I make different choices than I used to. That's my right. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You're lying. I can see it. You found something. Believe what you want. But unless you have actual proof, you need to leave my apartment. Now. Garrison looked like he wanted to argue further. But even he could see they had crossed a line. They had searched her home, invaded her privacy, torn through her daughter's bedroom. Going further would require legal action they couldn't yet justify. This isn't over, Garrison said as they left. We're going to find out the truth. And when we do, Margot, you're going to regret hiding it." After they left, Margot sank onto Iris's bed, surrounded by clothes her siblings had pulled from the armoire. Her hands were shaking, but she felt a strange sense of triumph. They had looked, they had searched, and they had found nothing. But she knew Garrison wouldn't give up. He would hire more investigators. He would look for bank records, spending patterns, anything that could prove she had money she shouldn't have. The pressure would continue to build until something broke. That night, after Iris came home and they had cleaned up the bedroom together, Margot made a decision. She couldn't live under this constant threat, couldn't spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for her siblings to discover the truth. It was time to stop hiding. The Keeper's Legacy. The knock on the door came on a Tuesday morning in late March, exactly 18 months after Claire Morrison had been exonerated. She was in the back room of the store sorting through a shipment of local honey that Mrs. Patterson had brought in when she heard the bell chime and footsteps cross the wooden floor. Maria called out from the front counter, "Miss Claire, there's someone here to see you." Claire wiped her hands on her apron and walked out to find a woman standing in the middle of the store, looking around with an expression that was part wonder, part nostalgia. She was in her late 30s, tall and slender with dark hair, pulled back in a professional bun, and eyes that were startlingly familiar, gray-green like pond water in certain light, like Morrison eyes. "Can I help you?" Claire asked. The woman turned and her face broke into a smile that transformed her entirely. "Aunt Claire, I'm Rebecca. Rebecca Morrison Chen, Thomas's daughter." Claire felt the world tilt sideways. Thomas, her younger brother, the one who had cut off all contact with the family after their father died, who had moved to California and changed his life and never looked back. The brother who had not come to their mother's funeral, who had not written during Claire's 30 years in prison, who had, as far as Claire knew, pretended the Morrison family had never existed. "Thomas had a daughter," Claire said faintly. "Two daughters, actually. I'm the oldest. Vanessa is 28. Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. "This is us. Last Christmas." The photo showed two women who could have been twins, both with the Morrison bone structure, both with those distinctive eyes. Standing between them was an elderly Asian man in a wheelchair, smiling despite his obvious frailty. "That's my father," Rebecca said quietly. "He died 6 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was very fast." Claire took the photograph with trembling hands. Thomas looked nothing like the angry young man who had stormed out of their mother's hospital room 34 years ago, screaming that he was done with this family and its cursed land and its endless tragedy. This man looked peaceful, content, like he had found something worth staying for. "I'm sorry," Claire managed. "I didn't know. We lost touch." "I know." Rebecca's voice was gentle. "He told me everything before he died. About the trial. About leaving. About the guilt he carried for 34 years. She paused. He wanted me to find you, to give you something. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a manila envelope thick with papers. What is this? His confession, his testimony. Everything he witnessed the week before your trial. Everything Earl Grayson threatened him with if he didn't leave town and keep his mouth shut. Claire's hands went numb. The envelope fell to the counter with a soft thud. He knew, she whispered. He knew I was innocent, and he left anyway. He was 23 years old, Aunt Claire. Grayson threatened to kill him. Showed him photographs of what had happened to other people who had crossed the family. Dad was terrified. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. He spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. Built a good life. Raised us to value truth and justice. Donated to innocence projects. Volunteered with formerly incarcerated people. But he never forgave himself. Claire picked up the envelope again, feeling its weight. Inside were answers to questions she had stopped asking years ago. Proof that her own brother had known the truth and chosen silence over family. Why now? She asked. Why bring this to me now after I've already been exonerated? Because it's not just about you. Rebecca pulled out another document. My father witnessed Earl Grayson murder someone. A man named Douglas Pratt, the bank manager who threatened to come forward about the falsified records. The room went very quiet. Even Maria, who had been pretending not to listen from behind the register, stopped moving. Pratt died of a heart attack, Claire said. Pratt was poisoned. My father saw Earl Grayson's assistant put something in his coffee at a diner in Statesboro. He didn't understand what he was seeing at the time, but later when Pratt died 2 months after filing that affidavit, Dad put it together. Rebecca's voice was steady now, clinical. The assistant's name was Leonard Walsh. He's still alive. He's 78 years old and living in a nursing home in Savannah. And according to my father's notes, Walsh kept records. Insurance, he called it. Documentation of every crime he committed on Grayson's orders. Claire sat down heavily on the stool behind the counter. Her mind was racing, trying to process what this meant. If Walsh has records of a murder, then Marcus Grayson's conviction is just the beginning, Rebecca finished. The entire family legacy could come down. Every crime, every threat, every death they caused over 3 generations. All of it exposed. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. My father spent his last 6 weeks writing everything down. Names, dates, locations, everything he remembered from that week in 1994, when he was too scared to speak up. He wanted you to have it. He wanted you to decide what to do with it. Claire looked at the envelope, at the daughter of the brother who had abandoned her, at Maria, who was openly staring now, at the store her father had built on the land that had cost so much. What did your father want me to do? Rebecca smiled sadly. He said you'd know. He said you were the strongest person he'd ever known, and that if anyone could finish what he was too cowardly to start, it would be you. Before Claire could respond, the phone rang. Not her cell phone, not the cordless phone on the counter that they used for business, the avocado green rotary phone on the wall. the one that had been silent for nearly a year. Everyone in the store turned to stare at it. It rang again, insistent, demanding. Claire stood slowly and walked to the phone. She picked up the receiver. Hello. Static. Distance. And then a voice she had not heard in 34 years. Claire Bear, it's Tommy. Her brother's voice, young and scared and full of regret. I'm so sorry, sis. I'm so sorry I left you. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was just being a coward. Claire's vision blurred. Tommy, I can't make it right. I know that. But Rebecca can. She's got everything you need to burn it all down. The whole Grayson Empire. Everything they built on blood and lies. How do I know this is real? Claire whispered. How do I know I'm not imagining this? Her brother laughed, and it was the laugh she remembered from childhood. Remember when I was 8 and you were 12, and I broke Mom's favorite vase playing ball in the house? You took the blame for me, said you'd knocked it over while dusting. You got grounded for 2 weeks and never told them the truth. Claire's knees buckled. Only Tommy had known that. Only her brother. The crystal showed me something before I died, Tommy continued. It showed me what you've become, what you've built here. The garden over the well. The way you chose healing over revenge. I'm proud of you, Claire. I should have told you that when I was alive. The static surged. Use what Rebecca brought you. Use it to finish this. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but so no one else has to suffer what we did. The line went dead. Claire stood holding the receiver, tears streaming down her face. When she finally hung up, she turned to find Rebecca watching her with an expression that was part concern, part understanding. That phone, Rebecca said slowly. Dad told me about it. He said it was connected to something he didn't understand. Something that ran deeper than the gold, deeper than the land itself. Did he tell you about the well? He told me there was something down there, something sacred, something that should never be disturbed. Rebecca paused. He made me promise that if I ever came here, I would protect it. Whatever you're guarding, Aunt Claire, I'm here to help. Claire wiped her eyes and picked up the envelope again. This time, when she opened it, her hands were steady. Inside were 50 pages of Thomas Morrison's testimony. Detailed, specific, damning. He had witnessed Earl Grayson meeting with the forensic accountant 2 weeks before Claire's trial, handing over a briefcase full of cash. He had overheard conversations about fabricating evidence. He had seen Leonard Walsh Earl's assistant delivering envelopes to the judge's chambers after hours, and he had seen Walsh put something in Douglas Pratt's coffee at the Main Street Diner on a Sunday morning in February 1997, while Pratt sat reading the newspaper, completely unaware that he had 90 days left to live. This is enough to reopen a murder investigation, Claire said. More than that. Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed Claire a photograph. This is Leonard Walsh today. I visited him last week. He's dying. Emphysema. He has maybe 6 months left, and he wants to talk. The photo showed an elderly man in a hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, looking smaller than a person should be able to look and still be alive. Why would he talk now? Because he's terrified of what comes after, Rebecca said simply. He's killed at least 3 people on Earl Grayson's orders. He's ruined dozens of lives. And now he's facing judgment, and he wants to clear his conscience before he goes. What does he want in exchange? Immunity from prosecution, a guarantee that he won't die in prison. Rebecca's expression was neutral. I told him I couldn't promise anything, that it wasn't my decision to make. But I also told him that the woman who had the most reason to want him dead was the same woman who had turned down millions in gold mining rights because she believed in doing the right thing. Claire looked at the photo of Leonard Walsh again. This man had helped destroy her family, had helped send her to prison, had murdered a man who was trying to tell the truth, and he was dying scared and alone, wanting mercy he had never shown anyone else. I need to think about this, Claire said. Of course. Rebecca handed her a business card. I'm staying at the hotel in town for a few days. Call me when you're ready. After Rebecca left, Claire sat at the counter staring at the envelope. Maria approached cautiously, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You okay, Miss Claire? I don't know. Claire accepted the coffee gratefully. How do you forgive someone who helped destroy your life? How do you show mercy to someone who showed none to others? Maria was quiet for a moment. She was 26 years old, a single mother who had been working at the store for 6 months. Claire had hired her despite having no references, no work history, nothing but a criminal record for drug possession, and a daughter who needed her mother to succeed. I've been clean for 3 years, Maria said finally. 3 years since I got out. And you know what I learned? Mercy isn't about what someone deserves. It's about who you want to be. She set down her coffee cup. That man Walsh, he doesn't deserve forgiveness, but you deserve peace. And sometimes the only way to get peace is to let go of the right to punish. Claire reached over and squeezed Maria's hand. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Maria smiled. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You showed me what mercy looks like. Now maybe it's time to show someone else. That evening, Claire walked out to the garden over the sealed well. The spring plantings were just beginning to come up. Peas climbing their trellises. Early lettuce forming delicate green rosettes. The apple trees she had planted last fall were budding. She knelt in the dirt and put her hands flat on the ground, feeling the warmth that always emanated from this spot. The crystal buried deep below pulsed with its steady rhythm. I need guidance, she said to the earth, to the crystal, to whatever was listening. Tommy's daughter brought me a choice. I can help put away the man who helped destroy our family, but it means showing him mercy he never showed us. The warmth beneath her hands intensified, not uncomfortably, just present, steady. And then she heard voices, not through the phone this time, just in the air around her. Her mother's voice, her father's, Tommy's, all of them speaking at once, but somehow not drowning each other out. Choose healing, her mother said. Choose justice, her father said. Choose to be better than they were, Tommy said. The voices faded, but the message remained. Justice and healing weren't opposites. They were two parts of the same thing. She could pursue Walsh's testimony, use it to fully expose the Grayson crimes, and she could do it with mercy. Give him immunity. Let him die outside of prison, not because he deserved it, but because she refused to become the kind of person who traded mercy for revenge. Claire stood brushing the dirt from her knees. Her decision was made. The meeting with Leonard Walsh took place in a private room at the Savannah Hospice facility, where he was spending his final months. Angela Morris, the state prosecutor, had arranged it after Claire agreed to pursue Walsh's testimony. Rebecca was there, Owen Hartley, a court reporter to document everything, and Claire walking into the room where a dying man waited to confess his crimes. Walsh looked worse than his photograph. The oxygen tubes had multiplied. His skin had a grayish cast that spoke of organs shutting down. His hands trembled constantly, and his breathing sounded like sand being poured through a sieve. But his eyes were sharp, alert, aware. "Miss Morrison," he said when she entered. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Claire sat down in the chair across from his bed. She had prepared a speech, practiced what she would say, but looking at this withered man who had helped steal 30 years of her life, all her prepared words evaporated. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why did you do it?" Walsh was quiet for a long time. The only sound was his labored breathing and the beep of the monitors around him. "Money at first," he said finally. "Earl paid well. Better than I could make anywhere else with my education. And then it became something else. Loyalty, I guess. Or maybe just habit. You work for someone long enough, do their dirty work long enough, and you stop questioning it. You killed people." "I did." Walsh didn't look away. Douglas Pratt, a union organizer named James Sullivan, who was trying to organize the mill workers. A journalist from Atlanta who was investigating the Graysons' business practices. All of them made to look like accidents or natural causes. Claire felt sick. How? Compounds that mimic heart attacks. Untraceable in autopsy, especially if the coroner isn't looking too hard. And in Millbrook, with Grayson money paying for everything, coroners never look too hard. Angela Morris leaned forward. "Are you willing to testify to all of this, to provide documentation, names, dates, methods?" "I am. On one condition." Walsh's eyes found Claire's. "Miss Morrison gets final say on what happens to me. If she wants me prosecuted, I'll plead guilty. Take whatever sentence comes. But if she's willing to grant immunity, I want to die outside of prison, in this hospice, with whatever dignity I have left." "You don't deserve dignity," Claire said. The words came out harder than she intended. You don't deserve peace or comfort or mercy. You helped send an innocent woman to prison for 30 years. You murdered people who were just trying to tell the truth." "I know." Walsh's eyes filled with tears. "I know what I am, what I've done. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for mercy. And I know I have no right to ask it from you of all people." Claire stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Savannah was beautiful in the late afternoon light. Magnolias blooming, Spanish moss hanging from ancient oaks. Life continuing its endless cycle of growth and decay. She thought about Maria working at the store, about the second chance Claire had given her, about how mercy wasn't about what someone deserved, but about who you wanted to be. She thought about the garden over the well, about choosing to grow vegetables instead of mining gold, about healing instead of exploitation. She thought about her father's letters. Your greatest power is the power to choose who you become in the face of injustice. Claire turned back to face Walsh. You'll tell them everything. Every crime, every murder, every person you hurt on Earl Grayson's orders. You'll name names and provide documentation and answer every question they ask you. No holding back, no protecting anyone. I will, and in exchange, you'll get immunity from prosecution. You'll die here in this hospice with whatever comfort they can provide. Claire's voice was steel. But you don't get forgiveness from me. You don't get absolution. What you get is mercy. And you'll spend whatever time you have left understanding the difference. Walsh nodded slowly. That's more than I deserve. Yes, Claire said. It is. The testimony took 3 days. Walsh spoke for hours at a time, pausing only when his breathing became too labored to continue. The court reporter's fingers flew across the keys, documenting every word. He described how Earl Grayson had built an empire on fear and violence, how every business competitor who got too successful mysteriously went bankrupt or died in accidents, how every politician who refused to cooperate found themselves facing scandals or health crises, how the entire county had been run like a fiefdom for 3 generations with the Graysons as untouchable kings. He provided dates, methods, names of accomplices. He surrendered a storage unit key that led investigators to boxes of documents he had kept as insurance. Financial records, photographs, audio recordings. Enough evidence to launch a dozen new criminal investigations. And he described in clinical detail how he had poisoned Douglas Pratt with a compound that would cause a fatal heart attack within 60 to 90 days, leaving no trace that would show up in a standard autopsy. By the time he was finished, Angela Morris had enough evidence to potentially indict 37 people on charges ranging from conspiracy to murder. This is the biggest corruption case in Georgia history, she said to Claire on the evening of the 3rd day. They were sitting in a hotel bar in Savannah drinking bourbon and trying to process what they had just witnessed. When this goes public, it's going to shake the entire state. When does it go public? Claire asked. We need to verify everything Walsh told us first. Track down the documents in that storage unit. Interview witnesses. Build cases that will hold up in court. Angela swirled her bourbon. 3 months, maybe. 4 at the outside. And then we start making arrests. Marcus Grayson is already in prison for fraud and conspiracy. Now we're looking at accessory to murder. He knew what his father did. Walsh has testimony that Marcus helped cover up at least 2 of the killings. Angela's expression was grim. He'll never see the outside of a prison again. Claire should have felt satisfaction, vindication, the complete destruction of the family that had destroyed hers. But all she felt was tired. "I want to go home," she said. "Of course." Angela signaled for the check. "Claire, what you did in there, showing Walsh mercy that took strength most people don't have. It wasn't strength. It was just being too tired to carry hate anymore." Angela smiled. Sometimes those are the same thing. Claire returned to Millbrook to find the town buzzing with rumors. Word had leaked, as it always did in small towns, that something big was happening. That state investigators were asking questions about old deaths. That boxes of evidence had been seized from a storage facility in Augusta. People looked at Claire differently now, not with pity or suspicion, but with something approaching awe. She had been wrongly convicted, exonerated, and now she was at the center of what everyone was calling the trial of the century. She hated it. She just wanted to tend her garden and run her store and live quietly on the land her family had protected for generations. But history had other plans. Rebecca came to visit again a week after the Walsh testimony. This time she brought her sister Vanessa, who looked so much like their father that Claire had to sit down when she walked through the door. "We've been going through Dad's things," Rebecca said. They were sitting on the porch of the store watching the sun set over the mountains. "We found something we think you should have." Vanessa pulled out a wooden box, small and carefully carved. "Dad made this the year before he died. He said it was for you, for when you were ready." Claire opened the box. Inside was a key. Not brass, like the one to the store, but silver, ornate, old-looking. "What does it open?" "We don't know," Rebecca admitted. "There was a note with it, just 3 words, for the keeper." Claire's breath caught. She picked up the key, feeling its weight. It was warm to the touch, warmer than it should be, sitting in a wooden box. "Your father knew about the well," Claire said slowly, "about what's down there. He told us there was something on this land worth protecting, something beyond money or property." Rebecca met Claire's eyes. "He said you were the keeper now, that you'd know what to do when the time came." "The time for what?" "He didn't say, just that you'd know." That night, after her nieces had left, after the store was closed and the lights were out, Claire stood in the garden over the sealed well holding the silver key. The warmth from the crystal below was stronger than usual, pulsing, almost urgent. "What are you trying to tell me?" she asked the darkness. And then, impossibly, the sealed concrete cap began to glow. Faint lines of light tracing the geometric symbols her grandfather had etched into the surface 70 years ago. Claire knelt and touched the cap. It was warm beneath her fingers. And the symbols weren't just glowing. They were moving, rearranging themselves into patterns she almost recognized, like letters in a language she had never learned but somehow understood. The keeper opens. The cycle completes. The guardian passes. Claire stood abruptly, her heart pounding. The crystal was trying to tell her something. But what? She looked at the key in her hand, then at the glowing cap, then back at the key. There was a keyhole. She had never noticed it before, but now it was obvious. Hidden in the center of the cap, disguised as part of the geometric pattern, a small indentation that matched the key perfectly. Claire hesitated. Her father had sealed this well for a reason. Her grandfather before him. Opening it now after everything she had done to protect it felt dangerous. But the message was clear. The keeper opens. The cycle completes. She inserted the key into the hidden lock and turned it. The cap didn't open. Instead, it began to sink, slowly, smoothly descending into the earth like an elevator taking Claire with it. She stood, frozen on the concrete surface as it carried her down past the original depth of the well shaft, past the chamber where the crystal weighted deeper into the earth than should be possible. The descent took 90 seconds. When it stopped, Claire found herself standing in a chamber she had never seen before. It was vast, cathedral-sized. The walls were covered not in ancient paintings, but in crystalline formations that glowed with their own light. And all around the perimeter, set into alcoves carved from living rock, were objects. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each one carefully preserved, each one important in some way she couldn't quite understand. Claire stepped off the cap and walked slowly around the chamber, examining what was there. A Cherokee prayer wheel, ancient and beautiful. A surveyor's compass from the 1800s. A photograph of her great-great-grandfather, the first Morrison to homestead this land. Her father's favorite hammer, the one he had used to build the store. And in the center alcove, larger than the others, something she recognized immediately. Her mother's wedding ring. Claire picked it up with trembling hands. It was exactly as she remembered. Simple gold band with a tiny inscription inside. Forever from Henry. How had it gotten here? Her mother had been buried with this ring. Claire had seen it on her finger at the funeral 12 years ago. You're the keeper now. Claire spun around. Standing at the edge of the chamber, translucent but present, was her grandmother, Vera Morrison, dead for 53 years, looking exactly as she had in the old photographs. Grandma, the crystal doesn't just connect the living to the dead, Vera said. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It connects keepers across time. Every generation that has protected this land. Every Morrison who chose guardianship over exploitation. She gestured to the alcoves. These are our memories. Our sacrifices, the things we gave up to protect what matters. Your great-great-grandfather's compass, because he gave up his dream of exploring the West to stay here. Your father's hammer, because he chose to build a legacy instead of seeking fortune elsewhere. Your mother's ring, because she chose love of this land over comfort and ease. But she was buried with that ring. Vera smiled. The crystal takes what is offered freely. Your mother touched the crystal once, years before she died. She told it that When her time came, she wanted her love for this place to remain. The ring appeared here the day she passed. Not stolen, given. Claire looked around the chamber at all the objects, all the sacrifices, all the generations who had chosen this land over everything else. "What am I supposed to give up?" she asked. "That's for you to decide. Every keeper faces the same choice. What matters more, what you want, or what must be protected? I've already given up so much. 30 years of my life, my freedom, my future. That wasn't your sacrifice," Vera said gently. "That was stolen from you. Sacrifice is only meaningful when it's chosen." She began to fade. The crystal is waking Claire. The cycles are speeding up. Soon it will need a new keeper, someone younger, someone who can protect it for the next 70 years. "Wait, I don't understand. What cycles? What's waking?" But Vera was gone, leaving Claire alone in the vast chamber with its hundreds of artifacts and its impossible questions. The concrete cap began to rise, carrying her back to the surface. When she emerged into the night air, the garden was exactly as she had left it, but she was changed. Fundamentally, irrevocably. She was not just the owner of Morrison land anymore. She was the keeper of something far older, far more important, and soon she would have to decide what she was willing to sacrifice to protect it. The next morning, Claire called Rebecca. "I need to tell you something about this land, about what's really down in that well, and about what your father knew before he died." They met at the store after hours. Claire locked the doors and drew the shades. Then she told her nieces everything about the crystal, about the visions, about the phone that connected the living to the dead, about the chamber below the chamber, with its artifacts and its impossibilities, about being the keeper of something she didn't fully understand, but knew she had to protect. Rebecca and Vanessa listened in silence. When Claire finished, they looked at each other, then back at her. "We believe you," Vanessa said simply. "Just like that. Our father spent his last weeks talking about this place," Rebecca said. "About the responsibility, the weight of knowing something that couldn't be explained or shared. He said it was both a blessing and a burden." She paused. "He also said that when the time came, we would have to help you carry it." "Help me how?" "By being keepers too." Rebecca pulled out a document. "We're moving back, both of us. Vanessa's selling her practice in Sacramento. I'm leaving my law firm. We're coming here, to Millbrook, to this land. Why would you give up your lives for this?" "Because it's our legacy too," Vanessa said. "Because Dad spent his whole life running from it, and it destroyed him. Because we don't want to make the same mistake." She smiled. "And because you shouldn't have to do this alone." Claire felt tears burning in her eyes. "You have no idea what you're agreeing to. The responsibility, the isolation, the weight of keeping secrets that sound insane if you try to explain them." "Then teach us," Rebecca said. "Teach us how to be keepers, Let us help protect what our family has guarded for generations. Claire looked at her nieces, at these young women who were willing to upend their entire lives for a responsibility they barely understood. At family she thought she had lost forever. "All right," she said finally. "I'll teach you. But first, you need to touch the crystal. You need to see what it shows you. And then you need to decide if you can live with knowing what you'll know." They went to the well that night, the three of them walking through the moonlit garden, carrying the weight of what was about to happen. Claire used the silver key to activate the cap. This time she knew what to expect. The smooth descent, the vast chamber, the glowing artifacts. Rebecca and Vanessa descended with her, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. "The crystal is at the center," Claire said, pointing to the passage that led to the original chamber. "When you touch it, it will show you things. Past, future, truth. It won't be gentle. It won't ask permission. It will show you everything you need to see to understand what this responsibility means." "Have you touched it?" Vanessa asked. "Once. When I first found it, it showed me my father, showed me the truth about what happened to our family." "What will it show us, sir?" "I don't know. It's different for everyone. It shows you what you need to see." Rebecca stepped forward. "I'll go first." Claire led her to the central chamber. The crystal pulsed with its golden light, steady and patient. "Just touch it," Claire said, "and don't let go no matter what you see. If you let go too soon, you'll be lost between worlds." Rebecca took a breath and reached out. The moment her fingers made contact, her body went rigid. Her eyes widened, seeing things Claire couldn't. Tears began streaming down her face. Claire counted. 1 minute, 2, 3. At 5 minutes, Rebecca's hand fell away and she collapsed. Claire caught her before she hit the ground. "What did you see?" Claire asked when Rebecca could breathe again. "Everything," Rebecca whispered. "Our whole family. 4 generations of keepers. All of them choosing this land over easier lives. All of them carrying the weight of knowledge that couldn't be shared." She looked up at Claire. "And I saw Dad, young, standing right here, touching the crystal, being shown what he would have to sacrifice if he stayed." "What did it show him?" "It you. In prison. Suffering. He saw your future if he stayed and tried to fight the Graysons. They would have killed him. And without his testimony later, you would have never been exonerated. He had to leave, had to stay away, so that 34 years later, I could bring you the evidence that set you free." Claire felt something shift in her chest. A weight she had carried for decades, the anger at her brother for abandoning her, suddenly lightening. "He didn't abandon me," she said slowly. "He was protecting the future. He was making the sacrifice required of him." Rebecca agreed. "Just like every keeper does." Vanessa touched the crystal next. She emerged after 7 minutes, shaking and pale but determined. "I saw Mom," she said. "Our mother. She died when I was 10. Car accident. But it wasn't an accident. The Graysons had her killed because she was investigating their business practices for a legal journal article. Claire felt sick. I didn't know. Neither did we. Dad never told us. He spent 28 years pretending it was random chance. But the crystal showed me the truth. Vanessa wiped her eyes, and it showed me why we're here. Why we came back. This isn't just about protecting a well or guarding a secret. It's about making sure no family ever suffers what ours did. The three of them sat in the chamber for a long time processing what they had seen and learned. Finally, Claire spoke. The crystal is waking. My grandmother told me. The cycles are speeding up. Soon it will need a new keeper. What does that mean? Rebecca asked. I don't know, but I think it means my time as primary keeper is coming to an end, and one of you will have to take over. How do we know which one? The crystal will choose. When the time comes, it will make itself known. They returned to the surface as dawn was breaking. The garden glowed in the early light, peaceful and ordinary. But beneath it, in chambers hidden from the world, impossible things waited. Claire looked at her nieces, at the family she had thought she'd lost, at the future she hadn't dared to imagine. Welcome to the legacy, she said. Welcome to being keepers of the well. The arrests began 3 months later, exactly as Angela Morris had predicted. It started with small players, county officials who had accepted bribes, lawyers who had falsified documents, businessmen who had colluded with the Graysons to eliminate competition. Then it moved up. Former sheriff's deputies, judges, state legislators, and finally, on a humid morning in July, federal agents arrested Marcus Grayson's 2 sons on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and fraud. The Grayson empire, which had dominated Millbrook for 3 generations, collapsed completely in less than 6 months. Their assets were seized. Their businesses sold. Their properties auctioned. The money went to victims' families, to restitution funds, to community rebuilding projects. And the land that Earl Grayson had killed to acquire the Morrison property that had cost so many lives remained exactly where it had always been. In Morrison hands. Protected. Guarded. Sacred. Claire stood in her garden one year to the day after Rebecca's first visit and thought about cycles, about how everything that rose eventually fell, about how justice, though slow, was inevitable, about how the land remembered everything even when people forgot. Rebecca and Vanessa had kept their word. They had moved to Millbrook. Rebecca had opened a small law practice focused on wrongful conviction cases. Vanessa was teaching biology at the local community college and writing a book about indigenous sacred sites. And together the 3 of them were learning what it meant to be keepers. They took turns tending the garden, maintaining the store, answering the phone when it rang, which it did occasionally, always with messages from the other side. They had established rules. No one told anyone about the crystal who didn't need to know. No one touched it without a serious reason. No one tried to exploit it or study it or explain it. Some things were meant to be mysteries. Some powers were meant to be protected, not understood. Claire was 66 now. She could feel age catching up with her in ways she hadn't during her prison years. Her knees ached on cold mornings. Her hands were stiff. She tired more easily, but she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. She had family. She had purpose. She had a home that was truly hers. The phone rang. Claire walked to it unhurried, picked up the receiver. "Hello." "Claire, it's your father." Henry Morrison's voice warm and familiar. "Hi, Daddy. I'm proud of you, honey. Proud of everything you've built. Everything you've protected. Everything you've become. I couldn't have done it without your letters. Without your planning. You did it because you're stronger than I ever was. Braver than I knew how to be." A pause. "It's almost time, Claire. The crystal is ready to choose the next keeper. Are you prepared?" Claire looked out the window at Rebecca and Vanessa working together in the garden. Strong, capable, ready. "I am." "Then trust the crystal. Trust the land. Trust that everything happens in its right time." The line went dead. Claire hung up the phone and walked outside. Her nieces looked up as she approached. "It's time," Claire said. "The crystal is ready to choose." They went to the well together that evening, all three of them. Used the silver key to descend. Walked through the vast chamber to the smaller one where the crystal waited. It was glowing brighter than Claire had ever seen it, pulsing with an urgency that made the air vibrate. "Touch it," Claire said to her nieces, "both of you at the same time." Rebecca and Vanessa reached out together. Their fingers made contact with the crystal's surface. The glow intensified until the entire chamber was filled with golden light. Claire had to shield her eyes. And then the light condensed, focused, flowed from the crystal into one of the young women. Vanessa. She gasped as the light entered her. Her whole body began to glow from within. And when she opened her eyes, they were different. Still, her eyes still human, but touched by something older. Something vast. "I am the keeper now," she said. And her voice echoed with harmonics that weren't quite human. "I understand. I accept. I will guard what must be guarded." The light faded. Vanessa swayed and Rebecca called her. "What did it show you?" Rebecca asked. "Everything. The whole history of this place. Every keeper back to the first ones. The Cherokee people who discovered the crystal and built the first protections around it. The settlers who learned from them. Our family who took on the responsibility when the old keepers could no longer remain." Vanessa looked at Claire with those changed eyes. "And I saw the future. Not all of it, just glimpses. Enough to know that the work isn't finished. That the crystal needs protection now more than ever." "Why now?" Claire asked. "Because the world is changing. Technology is advancing. Soon, people will have tools that can detect the crystal from a distance, scan through solid rock, find things that should stay hidden. We need to prepare, need to establish legal protections, scientific explanations that don't explain the truth, cover stories that hold up to scrutiny. That's a lot of responsibility for one person, Rebecca said. Vanessa smiled. Good thing I have you, and Aunt Claire. We're keepers together even if the crystal only chose one of us as primary guardian. They returned to the surface. The garden was dark now, lit only by moonlight and stars. Claire felt lighter than she had in months. The responsibility she had carried alone for so long was being shared. The future was secure. The cycle was continuing. I need to tell you something, she said to her nieces, about what I'm planning to do with the store and the land when I'm gone. You're not going anywhere, Rebecca said quickly. Not soon, I hope. But eventually. And when I do this, all needs to pass to you. The property, the business, the responsibility. Claire pulled out a document she had prepared. I've had Owen draw up a new will. The land goes to both of you jointly. Cannot be sold, subdivided, or transferred outside the family. In perpetuity. Protected by conservation easements and historic site designations. The store becomes a family trust, run by Morrisons for as long as there are Morrisons to run it. If the line dies out, it goes to a non-profit dedicated to preserving indigenous sacred sites. You've thought of everything, Vanessa said. I've had time, a lot of time. In prison, all I could do was think about the future, about how to protect what mattered if I ever got the chance. Claire smiled. Now I have that chance, and I'm going to make sure that what I protect outlasts me by generations. They stood together in the moonlight. 3 generations of Morrison women guardians of a secret that stretched back centuries and would extend forward just as far. The crystal pulsed beneath their feet, content, secure, protected. And somewhere in the distance a phone began to ring. But it wasn't the avocado phone in the store. It was coming from town, from houses and businesses up and down Main Street. Old phones, disconnected phones that shouldn't work. All of them ringing at once. Claire looked at her nieces. It started. What has, Rebecca asked? The awakening. The crystal isn't the only one. There are others, scattered across sacred sites throughout the region, and they're all connected, all waking up at the same time. What do we do? Claire thought about her grandmother's words. The cycles are speeding up. We find the other keepers, she said. We make alliances. We build a network of protection that spans all the sacred sites. Because if they're all waking up, it means something is coming. Something that threatens all of them. How do we find other keepers? We answer the phones. They walked and back toward town together. Behind them, the garden glowed faintly with reflected moonlight. The sealed well hummed with barely audible harmonics. And deep below, in chambers older than memory, the crystal pulsed with a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the earth itself. Morrison's country store stood exactly as it had for 70 years. Red paint fresh, windows clean, sign hand-carved and honest. But now it was more than a store. It was a sanctuary, a guardian house, a place where the impossible was protected by people who understood that some truths were bigger than belief. Claire Morrison, once a prisoner, once a victim, now a keeper, walked through her door and picked up the phone. "Hello," she said. And across time and distance, across the boundaries between worlds, someone answered. The work was just beginning.